So this surveying eye of the Department of Indian Affairs collects information, collects a lot of data about a lot of people, but it's only relevant to them. It's not relevant to the people that they're responsible, legally responsible to look after or to be responsible for. So today everything's all better, right? Everybody lives in harmony now. Those of us who aren't Indigenous really understand our First Nations, Métis, and Inuit neighbors, don't we? Our Premier can put on a button blanket, or he can pose with First Nations people. And I saw an image of our Premier with wearing a button blanket, and I haven't been able to find it since. But who looks most uncomfortable in this picture? The guy here looks like he's going to wet himself. Oh no, I'm going to touch an Indian. What am I going to do? But he looks, it's frightening. Our Prime Minister can apologize for past abuses. So this is the residential school apology. He's looking very sincere here, so he must be in it. But I'm sorry for my glibness. If one pays attention, though, to what Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond, BC's representative for children, has said in recent months and years now, or listens to the news about the lack of safe drinking water in dozens and dozens of Indigenous communities, or looks at the overrepresentation of Indigenous peoples in all levels of the criminal justice system, or the slow progress in investigating the many cases of missing Indigenous women in British Columbia and in Canada as a whole, it would seem, to me at least, that something remains desperately wrong. Again, despite all evidence to the contrary, images that we have all been subjected to daily throughout our lives of uncivilized, even savage, or not particularly bright Indigenous men and sexually available Indigenous women remain. And these images are broadcast to us in a myriad of forms, I think, in advertising, in the mascots and logos of sports teams, in the way news events are portrayed by the mainstream media, and perhaps most troubling at all, in my view at least, and maybe it's because I'm a father of a 9-year-old, but the images that are projected to children, and to all of our children. So I just want to kind of turn now and look at, for the remaining time, and look at some of those images. And this is probably the most ubiquitous one, I guess. Chief Wahoo, I believe is his name. The mascot for the Cleveland Indians baseball team. A 2005 Nielsen survey published in the Chicago Sun-Times suggested that the Cleveland Indians were the most hated baseball team in the United States. So they might want to think about rebranding. But this slide offers some suggestions maybe for them. So maybe the Cleveland Asians, or the Cleveland Africans, or the Cleveland Hispanics. You know, these things, those last three seem kind of bizarre, at least to me, and yet we don't. Most of us don't even think about the Cleveland Indians as if they're a baseball team. And there's lots of these teams. There's literally hundreds, I think, throughout North America. But we can accept one, most of us, or a lot of us, without a lot of thought. But the other three seem kind of bizarre. A group of Indigenous students at the University of Northern Colorado came up with this logo to protest against a local high school team called the Fightin' Redskins. So they come up with the Fightin' Whiteys. Every fang's going to be all white. So it's, again, and the mascot is perfect, right? The mascot is like a Coeur d'Alene author and playwright named Sherman Alexie reminded us some time ago in an interview that some of the symbols that are being used in sports teams and mascots are actually religious or spiritual in their intent and their meaning. And he tries to explain it to us. Feather, the pink, the sun, that's our religious imagery. You couldn't have a Catholic priest running around the floor with a basketball throwing communion wafers. You couldn't have a rabbi running around. Right? I mean, those would seem, to most of us, absolutely alien. And yet, we can have, people dressed up in Indian garb running around a football team and throwing spears, or a football field throwing spears. I think a cartoonist named Lalo Alcaraz says it best. Indigenous symbols and names also find their way and proliferate advertising in popular products. And I'm sure you can probably think of some off the top of your head. We've had Indian motorcycles, Zeller's Cherokee clothing line, Jeep Cherokee, and many, many, many others. In 1926, when General Motors announced the introduction of a new product line for 1926, it said that it would be called Pontiac. Later, as General Motors put it, the greatest Indian chief who ever appeared on the American continent. And Pontiac was a leader and was effective in military efforts against the British. Was quite successful, and the British were quite offended that this Indigenous leader could take them on militarily. And he becomes in this sort of power vacuum in the 1760s. But over time, the relationship, even if it's pan-Indian, opposed to anything kind of specific, remains. So we've got this General Motors ad from, looks like 1956 or 57, maybe 58. Anyway, the mid-50s. And if you look at this part here, we've got this child climbing on on a totem pole. And it says, full of spunk, saying that the car is full of spunk, but also this child is full of spunk because he's climbing up there and looks like his mom's taking a picture of him, and isn't this going to be a great vacation shot? But think about how an advertising agency would present the boy as spunky if he was climbing up a Christian cross. Would that be spunky? Would Chevrolet be able to use that as an advertisement? Seems unlikely to me, anyway. Over time, the connection between the actual Ottawa chief, Pontiac, and General Motors product, Pontiac, seems to have become more tenuous. So they still had, until recently, they still had a Pontiac line, but it seems to have gotten severed with the actual person, Pontiac. Other Indigenous leaders haven't been so lucky. One of the most prominent of those, I think, is Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse Sanuka Witko was with Sitting Bull when they and a group of Lakota warriors defeated General George Custer at the Battle of Little Bighorn. And Crazy Horse's name has been associated with well over 100 products and businesses around the world. For example, there is a line of Crazy Horse, or a series of Crazy Horse gentlemen's clubs, and a number of them. There's some in Canada, and they're around the world. This particular image is from the one in Paris. I'll make a test of my left here, but I've actually got a... Done it now. Anyway, no, I think we'll just pass on that. I had a link to the actual club. But you can, if you ever want to Google it, you can just Google Crazy Horse Paris and it'll pop up. But it's interesting images. Let's say it that way. You've got to really watch. You're sitting in your office, right? People are walking by. Oh no, there's the dean, right? So anyway, so I hope they never do a kind of a forensic study of my hard drive. In 2004, Alfred Red Cloud, Lakota chief from South Dakota, traveled to this exclusive street on the Champs-Élysées in Paris to deliver a letter from Harvey White Woman, who's a descendant of Crazy Horse. And this is what he says after he delivers the letter. For us, women are sacred. They are the guardians of the generations to come, the mothers, grandmothers, aunts. We have great respect for women. One cannot use the name in this way and use women in this way. Crazy Horse is a sacred name for our people. So trying to explain to the owners of the Crazy Horse Saloon that this isn't appropriate on so many levels. The name, using the name itself and associating it with the strip club, but also using women as, if not a misogynist way, then at least an object, using it as object. And so he's trying to make kind of 2 points at the same time. The owners just flatly refused to change the name or change anything about their club because they were doing really well. Why would they? In another case, the descendants of Crazy Horse filed a lawsuit in federal court against the makers of a malt liquor that used his name without permission. And so the descendants of Crazy Horse again got involved in a dispute with the Hornell Brewing Company. That began in 1992 when the company bottled Crazy Horse malt liquor. The connection between Crazy Horse and what the family's lawyer called a product that has killed more Indians than Winchester and Remington combined. So, trying to connect an alcohol drink with an Indigenous leader who tried everything in his power to keep alcohol away from his people is not particularly respectful. And it's something that they actually had to engage in a lawsuit to get at least one of the companies that was producing it to stop. In 2001, the family of Crazy Horse settled part of their lawsuit against one of the 2 breweries that produced the beer. Some states banned the product, and it seems now to be no longer available anywhere. But still, I wonder if anyone would even consider producing a product like Pope John Paul Strawberry Schnapps or Ayatollah Khomeini Tequila Shooters. It seems really unlikely, right? I mean, look what happened to Salman Rushdie, and it was just, it's not talking about tequila shooters or anything like that. So, and it seems just even expressing that seems odd to me. And yet, we can have a Crazy Horse malt liquor. And he's not alone. There are dozens of these that have Indigenous connections to them. So here we have, this is just one more, I won't show you a dozen, but Iroquois Indian Head Beer, another product that seems not to be produced anymore, fortunately. But they just keep reproducing this image of connecting Indigenous people and alcohol, which seems to me to be inappropriate and offensive. Okay, one of the most disturbing elements in all of this, again, probably as the father of a 9-year-old, are the images that are presented to children. So you might not see this as particularly offensive. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot worse than this. I don't have them digitized, unfortunately, but even this. I mean, the dichotomy between the savage with the tomahawk on one side and the stoic, maybe noble savage on the other. This division of the dichotomy that's existed at least since the 16th century continues. And this was produced. The copyright for this was 1991. So it's something that continues to be produced. And I've only been teaching for 10 years, but early on I had students that were doing education, and they'd go out to schools, and some of them would come back and say that they had these logos across their classrooms, Eyes for Indian and those kinds of things. So it's not dead, and I think it's something that we need to be concerned about. So what your child sees this, and maybe it's not harmful, but it becomes more and more embedded in how they, if they're not Indigenous, how they present or how they view Indigenous people as savage. And there are lots, and it's still, again, think about how you would respond, or how public at large would respond if we had a C is for Caucasian, or J is for Jew, or B is for black man. Never mind what N might be for. So it's there's this idea that I is for Indian is okay, but that doesn't offend us too much. But the other ones just seem way beyond the pale to us. I didn't actually mean that, but one of the most obvious is Pocahontas, I think. And there are the left piece is an engraving by, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but I think it's Simon de Pas in 1616. That's a year before Pocahontas died in England. The image on the right is from Disney's cartoon, Pocahontas. Pocahontas was born